Kellark tried to fight the net, but it wasn't any use. Desala had her on one side, while Letzi tugged on the other, dragging her step by step towards the waiting waters. The weights around her chest and feet made it so hard to fight. The gag in her mouth was tight, but she tried to struggle as they dragged her toward the water. Goddess, she tried. I mean, really? Desala half between pulls. You really shouldn't be this heavy. I think my little sister is about your size. How can someone with no tits at all weigh so much? Letzi was laughing hysterically as they pulled her onto the dock. And there were Jaxmi, Belder, Melondi and the twins, standing by the side, holding scorecards? Kellark tried to scream again, and looked about wildly as Deshin pulled her past the boathouse. Professor Warwick was standing there, and she looked up, imploring his help, but he only started humming. Letzi took a fresh grip on the net, hauling her close to the edge. I mean, no one is going to notice when you're gone. It's not like you fit in with that hair. Ugh. It's just so 3 years ago. There's no way any noble will be seen dead that way. Desala let go of the net and was looking at her nails. But you aren't a noble, are you? So, dead it is. Bye. Desala reached down and took hold on the opposite side of the net from Letzi, lifting her up and starting to swing, back and forth, building up speed, getting ready to toss her into the deep. She floundered around and looked back at the girls. They were getting the scorecards ready, and there was a pounding as she screamed against the gag. Ah! Kellark woke with a start, as the pounding on her door continued. Who? What? 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 Kellark? Are you all right? Belder was battering on the door. Kellark looked around wildly, as her eyes tried to focus and rushed to stand up, nearly falling out of bed thanks to the blankets tangled about her legs. She barely caught herself as she floundered to the desk and shook her head, frantically trying to clear her thoughts. Just wait, I'm coming. Just a moment, she called out. The clock on the desk said 7 a.m., and she groaned. This was no way to start the first day of Shell. Kellark settled down with her tray, while Melondi sat beside her with a worried look on her face. She smiled back, thankfully, and picked up her tea, blowing on the surface before taking a sip. Her thoughts still felt a bit scrambled, but she dressed as fast as she could while the others helped. They had been solicitous about making sure she was all right, and she somehow managed to get through the cafe line with breakfast. So, all right, wait, she said. You want to do that for the student show? Absolutely. The Academy says it's something the students decide on, but no one ever really does anything very different from the year before. It's just the same thing over and over as far as I can tell, explained Kamara. I wasn't sure about it at first, but after we started hashing it out, I think we can pitch the idea to the student council today. Jaxmi is running for a seat this year, but we could all have a hand in the show. Anyway, we were talking about it yesterday morning when we found out. That's why we sent Belder over. I saw the text later. Thanks for watching me yesterday. Kellark swallowed down the lump in her throat as she looked at the others, who looked back with a mixture of concern and expectation. It means a lot to me. It seems like you've got a real feel for what was going on in the show we watched, Jaxmi said, as she stabbed at her food. I mean, we wanted your ideas anyway, but you seem to have a great eye for how it was filmed. I was in the media club at my last school. Kellark nearly fumbled her fork, but it was true enough. For the year before. I liked it. Lighting and perspective makes a huge difference in presentation. That sort of thing. See? That's going to be important. It would be great if you come and talk to the council with us today. We're getting together at the student union this afternoon to talk over our idea, before meeting with the new music professor tomorrow. Kamara was nodding, and seemed enthusiastic as she explained, but paused. Has anyone met her? I have, nodded Caslin. She's kind of intense, but she's pretty dynamic too. She has a great ear. I mean, she's working us hard at practice, but she wants things to be really tight. I think it's nice that she's trying to challenge us. Jacksmy and Melondi's omnipads chimed, as Kellock thought about the staging. It was kind of a neat idea, if she could only see more of how it was done. She was picking over an idea or two, when Melondi read her pad and piped up. Hey, it's a text from Deshin. She wanted to know if we have class notes from the other day. Jacksmy grinned and reached for her pad. Group invite. Add. Belder, Kamara, Caslin, Kellock, Melondi, Deshin. Where have you been? Deshin. Family stuff at home. All right now, what's going on? Jacksmy. We're all at breakfast over at my hall. Can you join us? Idea we want to talk about, and we can give you notes here. Deshin. Be right there. Jacksmy set her omnipad back down, and looked over to Kellock and Belder. I know you haven't met Deshin, but she's great. You'll like her a lot. 2. Detachment 406. FM. Central Intelligence. RE. Data Pool. Captain Satar. Thank you for contacting us. Central has run a full search. Enclosed, please find an archival report we believe will be of help. See attached. Regardless, Devala, Eperisi. Captain, Sen Int, INM, Div 2. Lamanna frowned. Pod 4 in the bunker had been timely in reaching out to Central, and for a wonder, they were capable of a fast response. But a report dated from 5 years ago. She swiped open the attachment. 2. Central Intelligence. FM, MOI, Div 1, NAS East. RE, Terran Idioms. Addendum 6. Per our earlier reports to MOI Sen Int, a follow-on investigation discovered humans have a tradition where musical groups select distinctive names in an attempt to elevate public awareness of their work. This tradition is deeply ingrained, but as it predates any awareness of the Imperium, should not be taken as seditious. While open to misunderstandings when using only translators, cross-checking over several of the dominant human languages has provided confirmation. Please find attached a working compilation. In brief, I can confirm that the Velvet Underground is not a seditious organization. In proper context, 10,000 maniacs is not a mob gathering. Any references to massive attack and megadeath should not be considered as grounds for an elevated threat condition. Queen is not a ruler, while the king is a reference to a musician named Elvis Aaron Presley, subject deceased, as a matter of general acclaim. There is no one named Dr. Teeth, and the electric mayhem is unrelated to electronic warfare. Finally, while Alien Sex Fiend is in no way directed at our Marines, my subordinate strenuously recommends continually updating our introductory briefings for troops deploying on Earth. Axia. Agent. MOI Div 1, NAS East. Lamanna tossed the omnipad down and slowly rubbed one temple, allowing her thoughts to be still for one precious moment before she sniffed. 2 unvetted individuals in direct proximity to the objective, in less than 2 weeks, plus an alien from a planet still noted for its red zones. On the face of it, her response to the situation didn't remotely bear questioning. The girl's interrogation confirmed Capital News wasn't training the objective and about to blow her cover. The other girl wasn't even a reporter. Wasn't anyone, really. Tom Warwick's Intelligence League had turned out to be nothing at all. All of it was nothing but smoke. So be it. If her next 3 years meant chasing smoke 100 times, or 1,000, that was infinitely better than explaining how she'd missed a single fire. Lamarna picked up her red grail and took another sip. Half a glass on shell was a luxury she could allow herself, without dulling her senses in an emergency. She was on duty. Every minute of the day and night for the next 3 years. On duty. She closed her eyes, letting the drink roll over her tongue, and tried to make it last. Kellogg-Uton had been a regrettable necessity. 3 years from now, there would be a full accounting of her actions. When that day arrived, the record would show every order had been meticulously considered and acted on. Even here, under a secure cover on a secure campus in the capital of the most secure world in the galaxy, no one would say there was a single discrepancy she failed to follow to the end. Lamarna took another sip and ran a threat analysis through her mind. What she'd done was monstrous, but 3 years from now, Lamarna Davari would not be explaining why the Princess of the Realm was carried to her funeral instead of walking to her graduation. That wasn't going to happen, no matter the cost. She hoped that in 3 years, she'd be able to look at herself in the mirror again. So, I had things at home my mother's had to take care of, but it all got sorted. I don't really want to talk about it, if that's okay. Deshin looked downcast for a moment before perking up. Anyway, I came out ahead in the end. Oh? Melondi bit into her breakfast, but she was curious. Jaxmi was the only other girl at the table who knew Deshin, and it was just good manners to keep the conversation moving so the twins, Elder and Kellogg, could get to know her too. They were all being attentive, and Deshin's usual enthusiasm helped. Yeah, it turned out that Professor Warwick is offering a major that wasn't even on the books, so I decided to change over. It's going to mean a lot of work for him, but to help out he offered for me to become the student advisor for the class, and I said yes. Student advisor? Started one of the Kerbal sisters, while the other picked up with, What does that do? Deshin shrugged happily. He says he needs a hand in the library with the human collection, and I'm going to help anyone study that needs or wants it. I guess there will be other stuff, but it will help me with my new major too, so it's worth it. So, what is the new major? Asked Belder, after she finished a bite. I'm changing to English studies. That's the professor's native language, and I guess it's the major technical and trade language on Earth, sort of like trade shill is in the Empire. Jaxmi set her drink down, and was looking at Deshin thoughtfully. I never asked what your house does. Are you doing something on Earth like mine? I know the translators are good, but knowing the language could be a huge advantage. I guess I never did say, Deshin faltered. It's just that my family isn't... Well, we aren't... Say no more. Jaxmi held up her hand. It's not like your house would be the first one having hard times. Forget I asked. But anyway, I bet with a major like that you'll be able to get a job with any of the firms doing business on Earth. I know that's what I want to do, so you can definitely advise me. All of the girls got a smile out of that, and Deshin relaxed. So, what's this idea you wanted to talk to me about anyway? Oh, right. So we have a couple of hours to talk this over before we meet with the council. Kamara is going to help me pitch an idea about the student show this fall, and it's something we can all get in on. Here, you need to watch this. Tom closed his freezer and tossed the bag of hash browns on the counter before ticking a box off on his honor-pad. The pad dutifully tallied the bag off from the remaining food he still had in storage, and he frowned. Mivere spending the nights was a joy, and waking up together. How had he forgotten how much he loved doing that with a woman? Still, even after laying on a stock of plover and other Shulvanti food for her, the program didn't lie. He really hadn't planned around a healthy Shulvanti appetite. Tom looked over at the plover in his basket and sighed. He loved cooking things that Miv enjoyed, but the program's trend analysis was depressingly clear. He just hadn't packed enough coal stores, and a fair number of things were going to run out, no matter how he tried to stretch them. Coffee seemed to be the only thing he'd brought enough of, if you could call it that. 1 cup a day wasn't a supply, it was a penance. Problem for another day, he muttered, and opened the bag, pouring the diced potatoes on the pan. Miv was still dressing, and he had a minute. It was Shell, so there was no rush, and they just planned to watch the diving tryouts later that morning. He breathed in the aroma as the potatoes started to sizzle. As he heard Miv walking through the bedroom, Tom reached over and picked out a few plover for her. This was nice. Maybe not home just yet, but it was getting there, and the time was coming when, public facade or no, he wanted to sit down and talk about their future. That smells good. Mavere walked out of the bedroom in just a long t-shirt, and Tom looked her over appreciatively. At 6'7", there was a lot to take in. Miv enjoyed what passed for running on Shill, which was more of an endurance power walk, but there was no doubt about what it did for her figure. She wasn't muscular like a marine or a weightlifter, but there wasn't an inch of anything out of place. Stop staring, she grinned. I'm absolutely starving, and I love it when you make those. Anyway, we need to get out of here in an hour if you want to watch the tryouts. Yeah, I do, he nodded, turning his attention back to the stove. I want to check out the pool, too. It's still too damn hot, and I was thinking I could start doing some swimming during open hours. It's great exercise, and the water will be a lot nicer than sweating to death in the gym or walking around outside. Swimming? Tom looked back over his shoulder. Mavere was trying to chase away a worried expression, and Tom smiled ruefully. Swimming? I'll wear a shirt. Miv looked a lot happier at that, and he turned back to the stove. You could join me and wear your bikini. There was a sound of cutlery dropping, and Tom looked down, hiding a grin. It was starting to look like the bikini was doomed to never see the light of day. But damn, Miv was cute when she was flustered. There was the sound of cutlery being collected, while he flipped the hash browns to check how fast they were browning. The Shulvanti microwave was a definite improvement over Earth models, but he was still getting used to the stove. Tom, can you explain this student advisor thing you're doing with Deshin to me? Tom turned around and watched Mavere licking her fingertips, after finishing off one of the plover. Damn, that just never got old. Sure, it's mostly just lending us a hand, and I'll be able to teach Deshin English that much faster, if I use full immersion. Anyway, she can tutor with the other girls, help out to the library, that sort of thing. I figure if we only speak English while we're working, I can give her a pretty good working command of English in 3 years. And a study group will improve the other girls' grades too. Oh, that reminds me. I know we aren't discussing her background, but should we talk with her guidance counselor? A what? Guidance counselor. Tom frowned in thought. After only 3 weeks, he still had a lot to learn about how the academy was set up. A person that helps the students get on a career path after they graduate? Oh, you mean a vocational aide? Mavere was picking out a second plover, and Tom blinked, wondering how the first had disappeared so fast. Inner city schools have those, but the academy doesn't need them. Almost every single one of those girls will work in their family business for their house, or do something that's been set up by their family. I wouldn't worry too much. Deshin has a lot of friends, and if she uses those connections, one of them will probably arrange something. I suppose, if it works, he said. as he started scraping the hash browns from the pan, taking about a third on his plate, before handing the rest over to Miv. "You never really explained what happened to your house." It's a long story." Mavere grimaced and shook her head slightly. "There were a lot of legal entanglements from when my husband died. Can we not ruin the day by making me think about it?" "Sounds good." It had been a nice shell. Lamanna was caught up in every respect. The sole demand on her time was a meeting with the student council on the fall show. After doing some more research, the show did sound like an easy affair, after all. With a bit of luck, she could finish the meeting and enjoy the second day of Shell. A half hour on... "You want the choir to do what?" Lamanna stared. She was adept, trained to handle unforeseen situations without warning, but understanding required having adequate information. She knew she'd neither grasp what the girls were saying, nor quite believe what she'd heard. The words made sense individually, but taken as a whole. "It's expanding the performance. Usually it's just the orchestra playing, while all the other students just dress up and smile." Lamanna looked over at the speaker, Pran Javona, while several of the others at the table were nodding. Lavanna recalled that Pran was one of the fourth-year girls on the council, but the Chelksa girl... Lamanna recognized her from the surveillance feeds, was sitting next to her, and appeared to be one of the leaders in pushing this. Whatever it was, and was apparently in charge of clothing for the evening. "So, the orchestra and the choir act as musical accompaniment for the clubs as they entertain," said Pran. "We can set the stage on the green down by the pool, and we've been discussing acts with the IOTC, the gymnasts, and a couple of the other groups. I'm going to talk with Sephir Detain and ask her to get with the captain of the diving team, once the tryouts are done." "All right. I suppose I'm just not clear on how this is supposed to work. I was told this tends to be a concert event on the commons for the day parents pick you up for fall break." "Yes, but this year we want it to be something more. At least if the clubs have girls willing to try the things we're looking at. We have to see who's willing and able to do what, but as far as the music, Kaslin was sure she can get it worked out." "Get it worked out?" Jacksme nodded. "Yes. Anyway, we don't want to tie up your time until we've picked up the music, and find out if the clubs can make this work or not." "That's very kind of you," Lamanna said dryly. Given the expectations so far, she felt reasonably certain she was still missing a lot. But if the girls were still waiting to hear from other students, that could be the reason. Somehow, it still seemed... "So, we just need to find out how many members of the orchestra are willing to play while they're hung over the pool." "Hung over... what?" Arriving 5 minutes before class, Desala made her way over to Zephyr, with Letzi in tow. Except for that Reshe girl, the rest of the class was clustered together, and it never hurt to be curious. "Hey, Zephyr, you look great at practice yesterday." She moved over to Zephyr with a pleasant look pasted on her face, and tried to read the group. "What's going on?" "Oh, hey, Desala. I was just finding out about Deshin's new major with Professor Warwick, and the girls are telling me what the student council wants to try in the fall show." "Oh? So is the orchestra wearing black dresses with white or white dresses with black this year?" She smirked, as she looked over the twins. It didn't actually matter which was which, or they wouldn't try and hide it so much. One of them was on the council and the other was in the orchestra, so they both had a part in it. She couldn't go wrong either way. "It's going to be really different." Zephyr nodded and looked back. "Anyway, Deshin, what's this about being our student advisor?" Deshin tried to process what she'd just heard. So, the little know-it-all was back, and setting herself up as the human teacher's pet. The girl wasn't even from a house anyone ever heard of, And Desala looked her over. She was even putting on airs, dressed like one of the professors today, in the full academy jacket. And Sephir? Has Sephir really just brushed her off? You're going to give us advice? Desala managed to keep her voice friendly, She never could understand why someone like Sephir was friends with such an absolute nobody. But at least that would make it so much easier for Desala to be picked for captain of the diving team the year after next. Those two could be losers together. Canting her head curiously at Sephir, she took a step towards the Tersema girl. "All right then. What's your great advice?" she asked with cool amusement, before looking back from Sephir. Desala couldn't believe it. The little bitch was giving her the eye, and starting to smile. "Well..." Deshin looked over as the doors opened and the professors walked in. "I'd advise you to sit down and pay attention." And expanding the transportation network, particularly the railroads, opened the doors to extracting resources from the interior of colonial territories, from Africa to India. A few minutes were left, and most of the girls were a real joy. Maybe he was just reading into it, but it seemed to Tom as if the last 30 minutes for questions and answers was the best part. It was for him, but that only made the 3 dead spots in the room stand out. Nesta Roche had a bright mind, and seemed ready with an insightful answer whenever he called on her, but she never volunteered. Let's see, Trelange's answers tended to be more thoughtful, but somehow that was even worse. She was constantly deferring to Desala, instead of using her initiative. As for Desala Sehat, out of the last 25 minutes, she spent most of it poking at her omnipad. Since the pads held the girls' textbooks, that wasn't so unusual, but today it seemed like Sehat's mind wasn't anywhere near this week's work. He paused and watched the girl for a moment as she tapped on her pad, and he raised his voice. "What are your thoughts, Miss Desala?" Sehat froze and looked up from her omnipad, her mouth opening once or twice. "Your thoughts, Miss Desala. I have made a statement, and now I'm asking what you think about it." Tom let the moment linger, as he locked eyes on the girl. Let's see, Trelange's hand fluttered into the air, but he ignored it, as he slowly ascended the rows with a measured step. At a deliberately slow pace, it still only took him a few moments to reach the 3rd tier, where Sehat was sitting at the end. Desala stood around 6'6", and typically wore her black hair down, just over her shoulders. While almost all of the students dressed to impress, to one degree or the other, if she owned anything that wasn't tailored, Tom hadn't seen it. That didn't bother him a fraction so much as her answers. Why she even took the course was beyond him. She was in a class all her own for arrogance, too entitled for anything less than a golden spoon in her mouth. Tom walked close enough to stare down at the girl, who had placed her omnipad face down on the desk, but otherwise just looked confused. He reached down and picked up the pad and her purse, and began strolling back to the podium. "Professor, what are you doing?" Tom reached the desk and glanced over at Mavere, who sat folded with her hand over one knee, calmly watching. With his back to the class, he arched his eyebrows at her for a moment, before setting the pad down and scrolling to last week's notes. "Professor, those are my things!" "No, they were your things." Tom found what he was looking for, and pulled up what he was looking for, and pulled one of the pictures onto the classroom screen and turned around. Desala looked flustered, angry, and generally fit to be tied. He picked up the omnipad and looked at the screen. It had already gone into secure mode, but he stared at it, lingering as if reading what was there, before giving an audible huff. Mr. Sala, since you seem intent on communicating, perhaps it would be better if you do so with your mouth rather than your omnipad. As you seem unprepared to address today's topic, kindly address the picture on the screen. From last week's selected reading by the human, Shelby Foote. Tom locked eyes with the girl, who sat there agape. Being charitable, it might have been 5 seconds before he slowly leaned down and placed her handbag in the trash. The bin was empty. The bag looked expensive. "What are you doing?" Tom sat back against his desk. I looked down at the girl, before slowly reaching over and placing her omnipad in the trash. "You can't do that!" "Perhaps you think I am being arbitrary, Mr. Sala." What? You don't have the right!" Tom wanted desperately to look over the other girls, but he kept his eyes on Tshirt. "Perhaps you feel I'm violating your civil liberties?" "Yes! Yes, I do!" "And yet, by choice, you are here in my class. Because of your choice, for 3 hours a week you are on my time, and you belong to me. Unless you wish to fail this class, then, for those hours, what you do belongs entirely to me, and there is nothing you can do about it. Is that clearly understood?" Tom waited while Tshirt looked at the other girls for support. But while some looked confused, none of them looked ready to offer any sympathy. Shilvanti were deeply ingrained to bow to authority, and just at that moment, that was him, damn it. "Congratulations upon your epiphany, Mr. Sala." Tom enunciated the words with exaggerated care. Ingrained or not, Tshirt still looked one push shy of a tantrum. My what?" "In record time, you've clearly understood the perspective for every subject living in a colonial possession, with your property subject to search and seizure, and what you perceived as your rights being violated. The irony you share with the men in this photograph is that your perception was an illusion. Like them, you made your choice, and now you are facing the consequences." Tom took a moment to slowly cast his gaze over the class. Since Mr. Sala provided such an outstanding example, each of you will write an essay of no less than 1,000 words on the matter by the end of the week. Mr. Sala, since you have a thorough understanding, your essay will be 2,000 words. I expect you to fill every page with your intelligence. Now, I see our time is up. Professor Pelavon, do you have any closing words? "Oh, no, Professor." Miv arched an eyebrow, but was already packing up her things. "I think you've said everything." Tom took the hint and gathered his pad and notes without looking back. "All right, ladies. Mr. Sala, you may collect your things on the way out. Class is dismissed." The fuck if he didn't shut her down? Sergeant Diana chortled before reaching over Jelk's shoulder to grab a papaya. "Yeah, well, situational awareness," Jelk called out. "Because some lessons you get to learn once," chorused the girls. "Too right there," said Yala. "Maybe it will do her some good." "Bet you 5 credits she doesn't make it through the class," Diani said before biting into the papaya. "Put your money where your mouth is. Make it 50? Grinned Yala, as she leaned against the back wall. "No." Diani shook her head, but worked her way through the bite and licked her lips. "She's a little bitch, but she's still a noble. I'm good for 5, though." "Seriously? You people call that proper behavior for a commando? 5 credits on if she flunks the class?" Setar looked over, disgusted, and the women all found something more interesting to look at. Setar turned back to the control board. "That's better. Don't be such a sore cunt, Diani. Make it 10 credits and count me in." It was good to hear the girls laugh while they called Diani on her bet. Setar looked over at Biona, and shrugged as she stood up. 4 more months until they had a break, and it wasn't like they had anything to spend their pay on in the bunker. She moved aside for Biona to take left seat at the console, and whispered, "Morale." "Lick me. 100 credits says she chokes before finals," whispered Biona. "You're on." "So, what was the deal with that picture?" Yala leaned in, as Willan ran a check on pods working around the campus, before logging her board over. "I've been catching up, but I haven't been following this like you, Kalani and Vey." "So, the men in the picture were soldiers in the Civil War he discussed last week. Anyway, it's a picture of 3 captives from the side that lost the war, taken right after one of the most important battles." Roland stood up so Yala could trade places, then stretched. "You have the board?" "I have the board," confirmed Yala as she settled in. "So, I still don't get it." "Just look at the picture. I mean, their expressions. They just got their butts kicked, but they don't look like people who lost. Anyway, there's a story. One of the winning soldiers asked, 'Why are you fighting?' And the loser answered, 'Because you're down here.' I mean, the cause they were fighting for was sick, and the war totally devastated their nation, but just look at them. I think if you take everything else away, humans just fight out of stupid pride." "So, not exactly a lesson learned." Yala finished her check and looked back at Roland. "Fuck. I'm glad most of the red zones are finally gone, though. I heard some places used to be pretty brutal." Roland picked up her omnipad and thought about the lesson Warwick had been trying to give, and what it turned into. "I guess. I wonder if that's just how humans are if they feel backed into a corner."